Evening lovelies and a dank, fetid welcome back to Retro Rumble 2 and Alone in the Dark. We're jumping straight into it here in the paintings room. This charming oil work of an axe-wielding hunt monkey will come to life and start hurling his deadly payload at your finely coiffed head if you don't put him to bed with the old Indian cover here. Sweet dreams, chimp. Right at the other end of the hall you got another painting. This time of an actual Indian chief, and you think he'd be the one you'd have to use the old Indian cover on, wouldn't you? But no. No mercy for you, native! Son of a bitch. You only get 3 shots of this, you can't get your arrows back if you miss. It's way off center, but it might just... Shot through the face in a PC game! You're gonna need a new frame. Bada-boom! You don't need the bow anymore. Go ahead and excrete that from your inventory there. In fact, you don't need the bow whatsoever because, and I don't know if the developers actually meant for this to happen, probably not. But so long as you've got the arrows, you can just manually throw them at the chief yourself and they'll put them down just the same. That method's also got the added bonus of being able to go pick the arrows up if you miss too. Of course, major downside to that is that you will have to throw them, and we've all seen plenty of Edward's attempts at that, haven't we? Somebody's daddy weren't around to toss the old pigskin about with you when you were a kid, were they, Eddie? Out of the way, clock! What is it, 2:45 there? 3:30? Who has a grandfather clock in their bedroom? Bong! Bong! Yeah, no, it slept like a log, thanks.
The Creatures of Night by Hubertus the Bald, translated from Latin by his brother in prayer, Fratre Johann Marcus.
Of monstrosity. You who read me know that night engenders monsters, and that night creatures exist. The accursed book of Abdul al-Hazred is clear on this matter. That is not dead which can eternal lie. Unhappy he who knows that book. Unhappy he whose eyes alight upon that foulest of texts. Unhappy he who implores the standing stones, for he will free the powers of darkness. Of the pit. Stagnant waters are like the memory of men. Beneath the surface calm, clawed beasts await, and are known to initiates as the deep ones. Awaiting his prey, the deep one seizes him and drags him down to the abyss, where Dagon, the cruel god, swims and reveres him whose name may not be pronounced. Of libraries. Unhappy he who frees the prowler. Unhappy he who meets the prowler erring among the books. He generates the vagabond that comes from other spheres. He believes the vagabond does not exist. He will feel the embrace of death, for in the eyes of the vagabond, books are no more than dreams, stone no more than wind. The vagabond knows how to take the breath of the reckless. Of strife. He who speaks does not know, and believes he is able to kill the creatures of the night. Folly. Evil is conjured up by science and secrecy. He who prowls among books will perish by the blade. He who flies in the dark caverns will scream in fear. He who swims in the depths will evaporate. But he who believes he knows, knows nothing. He who knows says nothing. Of death. There are domains more terrible than death. that is not dead which can eternal lie. Each creature is conjured up and is not dead, but returns to the origins. A monster, a science. Steel kills the vagabond who never dies. Translator's note. Here ends the manuscript of Hubertus, who died in the library of the convent of Teruel in the year of our Lord 1666. Requiescat in pace.
Alright, Hubertus. Somewhere in that compendium of unnerving blabbering is the very vaguest of hints regarding the next supernatural heebie-jeebie merchant we're gonna have to put down here for our very next stop is indeed a library, and the vagabond that Hubertus so keenly cautions us to avoid is in fact a ghost that will chase you all around the aisles of bookcases and kill you outright if it touches you. This is another black cavern of a room that you need your lantern to find your way around, and there is a shit ton to do and find in here with your precious lantern oil burning all the while, so I strongly suggest grabbing yourself the key items and saving all the extra reading for another playthrough. First thing you want to get out of the way is that see-through purple dickhead. As Hubertus tells you, steel will do the job for you, but don't make the mistake of trying to go at the fucking thing with your sword. Search the bookcase here and you'll find a mechanism to trigger, which is obscure bullshittanese for use the dummy book on the bookshelf. And here you are, secret room. To put the vagabond down you need to use a dagger, very specific dagger of the three you'll find on the shelf here. The one with a wavy blade, perfect for dragging out all of its tricksy ghostly inside bits. And we picked up an afternoon's worth of reading there too. We'll get to that once we Bill Murray this son of a bitch. There you go, now you know it's onto you when it makes a noise like an elephant crapping out a tractor engine. Whoa, there it is. So you're trying to blindside you from between the bookcases there. You don't have to be too accurate, thankfully. This gangly, shitty mess of a character model is like half a mile wide, so you can just swing or stab roughly in front of you, and it will do the job. Aside from all the scrolls and tomes you've just got your hands on, there's another 4 books to find hidden around the library on various shelves. Like I said before, not a great idea to go looking for them on your main playthrough because your lantern is a greedy little bastard and it'll be gobbling that oil up the whole time you're searching. I did this part on a separate save file anyway because there's something I wanted to show you that'll end up killing me, so last couple of them down this row here. Get yourselves good and comfy now, Crusaders. It's story time for the next half an hour or so. It's a good thing Edward don't charge by the hour, isn't it? We found that bloody piano on the first damn screen. Let's start from the bottom here. Why not?
Daemonia Particularis, Signs and Rituals, by Heinrich Cassel, Ring Publications.
The ritual of invocation demands that the officiant be pure. We have already described the complex operations to be followed in order to call those that sleep in superior dimensions. We shall, for the present, limit ourselves to the sign of mutual recognition used amongst their number by adepts of the cult of the Old Ones. The sign also serves as protection when in the presence of a servant of evil. The sign resembles a blessing, save that the first and little fingers are both folded beneath the thumb, whilst the second and third fingers are held up. It would appear that this sign has no effect on adepts of a certain rank, with knowledge of particular secrets contained in the corpus demonicus. The use of such signs is not without considerable risk to the user during any attempt to call upon those from without.
Of course, we can't use that sign ourselves. God damn it, we barely have fingers. Look. This next one tells you a lot more directly which dagger you needed to use to stab that ghost in the face with.
The Sacrificial Dagger, Otto Stern, Lumina Books.
The importance placed on ritual sacrifice is constant in religious cult practice. Propitiating the gods is a theme common to many religions. The Old Testament affords many examples. Primitive polytheistic belief systems integrate sacrifice in their rituals as part of the recurrent process of reaffirmation and, naturally enough, group cohesion. The members of their social and religious community come together in an act of purification and atonement. It would be erroneous to imagine the act of human sacrifice, linking priest, offering, and God, C.F. Manzetti, stone cults, as anything less than a vital focusing of the group's faith. The act also ensures the continuing appeasement of the god, but only if practiced by a recognized officiating priest using the appropriate instrument. Studies made concerning primitive religious groups bear witness to the central role of sacrifice in living ritual. My own work in the field of ethnopsychology brought me into contact with a sorcerer living in the region of Arkham. He introduced me to the rite of steel, linked to a ceremony known as adoring the black goat of the woods with 1,000 youngs. The god being adored is known as the vagabond. Here, the dagger's role, which allows the life breath to pass from one dimension to another, is essential. The vagabond is a frightening figure, being able to move where he wants and to kill those who have displeased the goat god, for whom he acts as a go-between. The goat is clearly a fertility god. The priest, having spoken the invocation, must choose the appropriate dagger for the sacrifice. The knife with a sinusoidal blade that must be dipped 7 times, on night when the moon is full, in water that has been distilled 100 times, will be laid aside, since it would send the vagabond back into his own dimension. See illustration. The priest will rather choose the dagger with a curved blade. That is more appropriate for slitting of the lamb's throat. This act transfigures the sorcerer priest and plunges the assembled worshippers into a divine trance.
Well, we didn't do the whole super distilled water dipping thing, but that ghost ate shit all the same. Now pay special attention to this one.
Juan Luis Jorge, De Biblioteca, Reflections on the Power of the Verb in Certain Texts. Archaeos Publications, 1919, Stafford.
Translation does not alter the occult power contained within such forbidden texts. The malevolent energy is in no way diminished. The spell must be cast aloud and clearly, in certain languages or little-known dialects. Maglafar Fathang. The reader will understand that, in the light of these revelations, I would be foolhardy to continue quoting from the text I have before me. If spoken aloud in its entirety, it would surely awaken powerful and malignant forces. I will go further and say that simple reading of some of the more technical passages describing specific practices is in itself a perilous exercise. The ill-prepared reader can easily fall prey to attacks of demented hysteria, not unlike those described in cases of individuals said to be possessed by evil spirits. I recommend the study made by Zempf, Urbain, Grandier, and Loudon, and the reports made by the Reverend Richard Price concerning a number of astonishing, to say the least, exorcisms carried out in a parish near Providence. Given what I have written, we must be grateful to the librarians of the British Museum, who have never allowed consultation of the work of Al-Azif's startling work, the infamous Necronomicon. Copies of that work do exist, in spite of the zeal of book-burning inquisitors. For proof, we need look no further than the British Museum, of course, and the sealed archives of the Miskatonic University in Arkham. Other examples of books whose evil can be unleashed by any thoughtless reader are von Jutz's von Unersprechlichen Kulten and the abominable De Vermis Mysteries by Ludwig Prien, whose sordid death should be a lesson to all those tempted by a study of the occult.
Indeed, sir. Wise words. After such potent and thorough warning, one would be nothing short of a fool to even consider... Hey look! The Necronomicon!
Fragments of the Book of Abdul.
In the antique city of dead Relia, Cthulhu dreams and waits. In the pit of time, the unspeakable lies in wait. That is not dead which can eternal lie. Relia, your blocks of stone seal the ritual that gives birth to fear. Cthulhu Fatang! Cthulhu Fatang! Ayah! Ayah! Let he who knows how to invoke the stones act. It is time. Let the shadow of Cthulhu darken the sky. May the servitor of the black goat of the woods with 1,000 youngs sound his flute in honor of the unspeakable. Cthulhu Fatang! Cthulhu Fatang! Ayah! Ayah! May he who may not be named cast his withering gaze upon the unbeliever, for he is the door, the key, and the guardian of the door, and holds you now in his immense power.
Well, I don't know what all the fuss was about. I don't feel any... Oh, Jesus, here we go. Pounding headache. I think I'm rocking a new ear infection here. Fuck me, I've got 28 new ribs. That's my skeleton trying to pack its shit and run for the nearest taxi rank. And there you go. Show's over.
If Rocks Could Talk, or The Story of a Louisiana Plantation, by the Marquise de Chamfray.
After the criminal selling off of Florida by the foul usurper, my father elected to remain in this inhospitable land, where we were free at least to express our royalist feelings, and hope our country would come to its senses. In 1818, a certain Pickford bought up Ledoux's land, after the poor fellow had ruined himself in unfortunate speculation. Pickford soon turned out to be the most loathsome human we had ever encountered. He was an adventurer of the worst kind, nouveau riche, and bloated with a grotesque sense of self-importance. First came the incessant army of men with shovels, digging into the mountain of earth that was to fill in the surrounding swamp. The undertaking was quite stupendous. We learned from a slave that the final objective was to connect the existing caves with another one of gigantic proportions. Racked by a mania of persecution, Elia Pickford constantly fired his workers and hired new ones. He did all he could to keep anyone from learning about his plans. My father was amused and said, "The poor fool will end up getting lost in his own cave." But the walls went up, and tongues started wagging. Our detestable neighbor had been a sailor, a ruffian grown rich on questionable trade. Distasteful stories were told of him. When the work was finished, Pickford invited us to the opening of his rambling mansion, which he named Derceto. My father asked what the strange name meant. Pickford answered, "Derceto reminds me of Astarte, the fertility goddess. Around here, the name is Shub-Niggurath. I believe that a name so steeped in evil should be said aloud came as not such a shock to my father, as he himself confided in me some while later." We left immediately.
In June of 1862, Derceto was burned down in unexplained circumstances. It was undoubtedly the deed of some jealous Yankee or another. It was amazing to watch the servants rushing into the flames to try and save their bullet-riddled master. After that terrible night, Derceto fell into ruin. Its blackened walls were soon overgrown, as human-built works always are, by ever-present nature. In 1875, the property was eventually bought by a gentleman whose name was Howard Hartwood. I was sorry that my father, who delighted in fine conversation, was no longer alive to enjoy the company of this new neighbor. Learned and well-versed in history, he had made a particular study of piracy. It was Hartwood who told me that Pickford had commanded a ship that flew the flag of piracy. That explained the scoundrel's great wealth. Hartwood was fascinated by Pickford and undertook a great deal of research in an attempt to find some treasures that he was convinced the pirate had hidden. He went through the ruins inch by inch. He then had the burnt-out house rebuilt exactly as it had been, and refurbished the library that had miraculously escaped the flames on the night of the Great Fire. Hartwood set about studying every volume in that library, and often talked to me of his research. He was a handsome widower, deeply attached to his son Jeremy, who was later to become a professional artist. Hartwood worked incessantly, first from the room I offered him, then from his own freshly restored home, which he rebaptized Derceto. I imagine he hoped to enlist the help of the god of good fortune in his treasure hunt. As far as I have ever been able to tell, all his searching came to nothing. There were no lost treasure to be found at Derceto. I learned of Hartwood's death while I was in Paris. But that, as they say, is another story.
Still awake, Crusaders? Still clinging onto the curtain loops of consciousness with your ragged fingernails? Well, perhaps you need more books!
Unfinished chapter of Terra Incognita by Jacob Van Ostade. A hitherto unpublished fragment of the manuscript unearthed following indications furnished in the Vatican Library's Expurgatory Index.
In those icy and unwelcoming lands, the rites of wizards and healers are deeply rooted in ancient legend. Mysterious and cruel beings are thought to have ruled over the Arctic plains in times past. A cursed city, enclosed by massive walls, is believed to stand to this day. It contains fabulous treasures and is inhabited by the degenerate descendants of those who instilled centuries of terror in the hearts of the people. These people, naturally placid, are seized with rage and horror at the very mention of the prisoners of the ice. Were these dreadful captives to be freed from their frozen cells, they would reap a horrifying tribute of human flesh. These blood-curdling beings may be invoked by certain ritual words. They can even be controlled, albeit with the greatest of difficulty. I admit to being impressed by these tales, repeated to me on many occasions and in a number of different places during my travels in the region. I have also seen troubling cult objects, sculpted in a material unknown to me. Another remarkable fact is that local Eskimos experience great distaste in pronouncing certain words, and invariably avoid saying them. Here is a living example of the power that words contain. As it is said in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word.
This is nice, having somebody else narrate for half an hour. I'm just sitting here, sipping my tea, having a biscuit. Might have a trim on my toenails in a minute too.
The Sons of the Sun and of the Shadows. Lieutenant Lope de Vega's account of his astounding travels to the land of the Aztecs.
"Holy Christ!" cried Captain Cortez, astonished by the strange rite we beheld. We found the savages half naked. They were throwing balls of silver and gold at each other. They laughed as if demented, clearly maddened by some heathen drug. And yet, should one of them fail to catch the ball thrown in his direction, the poor devil was seized and dragged off to be sacrificed in their temple. As we discovered, this frightful game was a ritual most holy to them, and symbolized the movement of the heavenly bodies. The dropping of a ball foretold a catastrophe. That is what the Aztecs believed, in their godless ignorance. Their countless deities could only be appeased through endless human sacrifices. The victim's heart, which was still beating, lay in the hand of the murderous priest. The interior of the temple was surprisingly cool. The weight of our armor, our exhaustion, even the burden of our suffering, they were all banished by a sense of awe that the crudely magnificent altar instilled. In the tomb-like silence, a deep voice chanted an incantation. The majestic statue of the water goddess, Chalchihuitlicue, seemed to throb with vitality. This massive stone, draped in a golden cloak and studded with precious stones, was coming to life before our very eyes. Horror of horrors! The granite eyes of the statue, empty of life only moments before, were now injected with blood. We staggered back in amazement. Dom Jose was taken by a fit of convulsions. He tried to raise up his crucifix, as if to ward off an attack by demons. The heathen priest laughed cruelly. The statue's mouth cracked open in a deathly grin, bearing teeth sharpened to dagger points. Captain Cortez cried, "Attack!" But it was no use. We were glued to the spot. efforts, we were unable to move. Our armor seemed to be bolted to the temple floor. Our legs weakened, and we collapsed in a thunder of steel. Only Cortez had the presence of mind to unsheath his dagger. He hurled it at the cackling priest. 4 inches of the finest Toledo steel buried itself in the heathen's face. His blood spurted, splashing the now lifeless idol. We picked ourselves up with difficulty. Never will I forget that terrible moment. My companions, naturally enough, told tales of devilish enchantments cast upon our armor. Whatever the truth of that, I could not deny that the supreme god of the 4th universe had treated us as mere playthings. I am convinced that a terrible energy is yet contained within that heathen statue. A power strong enough to change a proud conquistador into a helpless puppet. Drawing of Chalchihuitlicue by Dom Jose de la Sierra, done before the destruction of the Aztec temple of Tenochtitlan.
And he was the best artist on the squad. Can you believe? They all had a competition and his drawing won. Alright, last one for now.
Ludwig Prien. De vermis mysteriis. Nomine invocatoris si non sanctificatus es cave. De vermis mysteriis non absolvo folem legendum fatum et eum versus. Tibi magnum innominandum signa stellarum nigrarum et...
The fuck is that? Some sort of warranty for a tumble dryer? Oh no, it's an incantation to levitate you 10 feet off the ground and break your skeleton in half. I got you. Oh, didn't see that on the drive-in. Alright. So yeah, don't read that book or the fragments of the Book of Abdul if you know what's good for you. Juan Luis told you, didn't he? How many times Juan Luis got to tell you to keep your damn curious man paws off the forbidden tomes of foreign doom, my dude? Fragments of the Book of Abdul won't kill you outright, just sends you temporarily insane, docks some health off you, and gives you a lifetime of severe spinal problems at the very least, you'd have to believe, even if Edward seems to have shrugged the worst of it off here. If you do want to read either of those accursed brochures of the Night Worlds and the Thousand-Babied Goat God without suffering any ill effects, you can do so by standing inside the pentagram in the hidden chamber, where we found Jeremy Hartwood's dagger collection. Maybe what I find most curious about Edward being contorted into a moustache pretzel there is the idea that he reads aloud every single book he comes across. Like, is the narration we hear Edward putting on funny voices? The portrayal of Jeremy Hartwood's descent into madness as presented in his diary takes on something of a different tone if you picture your character performing it mockingly to themselves. My house is haunted by bathroom octopi. I'm going to hang myself in the attic. You can read all the plot stuff anytime you like as well, so you could go and perform that to the octopus in the bathroom if so pleased you. Beware the rats down here. The deadly, deadly rats that deal 1 point of damage per bite and have an eagle's screech for an attack soundbite for some ungodly reason. Doesn't it sound like an eagle screech? The developers thought so too, because that exact sound effect got recycled in Alone in the Dark 3 for, wait for it, an actual fucking eagle. Sorry, these eagle rats crack me up. You see that block we just took there? That was meant to fuck you at the end of the game. You escape out this way, and if you didn't take the block, you'd be trapped back in that passage, but even if you leave it there, the barrels move out your way automatically, so big bit of plot incoming now.
The trial of Captain Pregs, as reported by his faithful companion Elisha Smith, known amongst his fraternity by the awful name of Captain Ellie Hell. Transcribed from the log found aboard the wreck of the frigate Astarte by H. Hartwood.
"By all the devils!" roared Pregs, glaring at William, the judge. "Curse it, Will! It'll take much more than every cannon in the blasted navy to make me change me mind. You're the greatest blackguard that ever joined our fraternity. Am I not Pregs, captain of the Astarte, and bloodiest villain in all the 7 seas? Bloody Ezek, they call me. And you think I'll tell you where I hid my treasure?"
The tribunal of the Corsairs' fraternity murmured at this. Pregs was indeed all he claimed. The judge, One-Eyed William, slammed his fist on the table, and silence was restored.
"Shut your mouth, Pregs! You didn't pay the fraternity its rightful share, and that means only one thing. You'll hang by the neck from a yardarm, you scurvy cur! Here's the rope twisted by Satan himself. You threaten me, Will? Many a man better than yourself has lived to regret holding a cutlass in my face. You'll be begging for mercy, mark my words."
That shook One-Eyed William, and no mistake. Danny waved his hook in the air and shouted,
"Prext was always a loudmouth. The law says we hang him."
The jurors took up the cry,
"Hang him!"
It was Preg's turn to slam his fist on the table. He threw back his head and roared with laughter.
"You fools! You want to kill what will never die? Try it!"
Once more, the assembled Corsairs murmured. There was unease in the air. They remembered what happened to Chuck, the gizzard slitter, the man who opened his mouth once too often. It was night, and a bitter wind whipped the New England coast. Snug inside the Dead Horse Inn, one of the Astarte's men was talking. His name was Chuck, and his subject was black magic. He told stories of human sacrifices, voodoo rites, and zombies. He told a tale of a time when their luck was down and they were holed up in a Florida swamp. Pregs went missing. When he returned, he shouted, "'Tis the devil that guides us now, me hearties!" Whether that was true or not, the Astarte began taking loot after juicy loot. The favorite song of the Astarte's men, "Crash the Bones," was replaced by a new one. "A skull, go to port, Sabre, to starboard. Pass over that will, and with death you'll deal. If you cut a rope, cut the right, I hope, or then, I don't mind, the death you will find." The next day, as you may have guessed, Chuck's body was found with a dagger plunged between his shoulder blades. Chuck's face was fixed in a ghastly grin. Molten lead had been poured down his throat. Whatever way things happened next, and I don't have the details, Prext was with us again, and we set sail for Florida. We anchored the frigate not far from New Orleans. Taking a few trusted companions with him, Prext set off into the swamp. They carried large wooden chests with them. 2 days later, we heard shots being fired and screams. Pregs arrived soon after that and claimed they'd been attacked by alligators. He alone managed to escape with his life. He went on to say that the time had come to share out the spoils of our many loots. I was given command of the Astarte, while Prext handed 3 chests over to the crew. The chests were full of gold and precious gemstones. The rum flowed that night, and the stars shone bright. All at once, I noticed a tall man dressed in black. Pregs introduced him to me. "Here's a hearty mate. You can call him Keith. Many a tale he could tell." Pregs laughed loudly and held up a roll of parchment. "And his hideout, none better." The parchment fell to the ground, partly unrolling. I noticed what seemed to be a map of underground tunnels, a veritable maze of caverns. Pregs continued, I'm giving up the pirate's life. The Astarte is in your hands now, my lad. She's a fine ship, and my reputation goes with her. Should any man call me coward, then break his head for me. I'm leaving you only because I found a treasure more precious than the purest of gold. Keith spoke to him then. It is midnight. They are ready, and we must go. The stranger turned his cold eyes on me and said in a soft, chilling voice, Sometimes Pregs talks too much. Forget what he just said, and maybe you'll live. The fellow's words froze the marrow in my bones, and it was all I could do to mumble, I'll not breathe a word. The canoe slid away into the night. Their torches disappeared in the distance of the swamp. My snoring companions didn't hear the insidious rhythm of far-off drums.
Alrighty, that story's just about starting to piece itself together now. Just keep your mind on the glaring similarity between Captain Pretz and that awful son of a bitch Elijah Pickford that we read about in the library, and the other gaps will be filled in before too long for you. One thing I did neglect to do for you in this collection of playthroughs is show you what happens if you try to walk out the front door before completing the game. And I do want to start including things like death thrills in these videos because they're always great fun if you're as preemptively morbid as I am. Basically, some sort of enormous vortex maggot punches you straight in the mouth with its arse, then hoovers you up his rectum. I'm not kidding. I am sorry I missed it. I'm sure you can look it up after this, but I will be more thorough starting from our next retro rumble, I promise. Using the cavalry saber to open up the secret passage there. You can still use it if it's in two pieces from your sorry attempts to fight zombies with it too, which is
The Tale
very
of Captain
forgiving.
J.W. Norton of the Army of the Union.
1862. The South was in collapse. Louisiana was open to us. I had each day to requisition victuals for our troops, and was aided in this endeavor by a score of brave men. Rebels were not yet ready to lay down their arms. The region was far from safe. I headed further and further west, and questioned many freed slaves. From them, I learned of a plantation on the coast. Its name was Derceto. We received a less than hearty welcome. Only Pickford, the owner, behaved in a friendly manner. While my men counted cattle and grain reserves, I learned what I could from him. Man was most unusual and possessed an extraordinarily cultured mind. At nightfall, I gave orders for the men to bivouac at Derceto. Pickford invited my second-in-command, Lieutenant Patterson, and myself to dine. And our host proved a most entertaining conversationalist. While coffee was being served, Patterson went to inspect the men's camp. The cigar Pickford offered me was so acrid that my head began to spin. I remembered campfire tales of fellow officers trapped by devilish Confederate tricks. My mind floated in a foul and dense fog, from which emerged the enlarged and deformed face of Pickford. He grinned at me. Patterson's return chased off the nightmare. I heard shouts and firing from outside and found the strength to take out my revolver. I fired 3 shots. Pickford fell to the floor. Patterson then helped me out of the burning house. The air was filled with smoke. We resembled a company in disorderly retreat. I saw slaves leaping into the flames of that inferno. They were trying to save Pickford's life.
Damning evidence of Elijah Pickford's entwinings with blackest magics. or the hallucinogenic ravings of a soldier that can't handle his funny fags. It got published, whatever it was, in hardback and everything. That's no small feat. We got a couple more jobs to knock on the head before we mosey on downstairs to the final part of Alone in the Dark, and I really don't think there's any more irritating in this game than having to fight this fucking pirate. It's never made clear to you whatsoever, but this is actually meant to be the ghost of Captain Pregs, which is incredibly confusing because you meet him at the end of the game in a very different form as well, but you can't shoot him, so get that out of your head. Just backflips away from you. You pretty much railroaded into having this sword fight with him because it's the only weapon that can do him any damage whatsoever. Now you can see here that he is just parrying everything I throw at him with hilarious ease. So the only way you're actually going to do a shit's worth of damage to him is to back him up into the corner of the room here and take no more than 2 or 3 slashes to the chest, doing it if you're lucky, and then cut him to ribbons with quick attacks faster than his animation will let him dodge you. You know the weirdest thing about this whole scene, don't you? Look at that paint pot on the ground there. See, the walls are reds. There's a few light brown smears on there too, like somebody's put in a pretty pitiful day's work redecorating. But the paint itself is clearly green. Clearly... This mansion is too much, isn't it? That shit's clearly there to mess with your mind and distract you from fighting this goddamn pirate who simply will not die. I honestly don't remember it taking this long. And I remember it taking a long, long fucking time. There we go. Thank Rudolph. He evaporates into balls and you get yourself the key to the ballroom there. So that's nice and thematic at the very least, isn't it? I'm just pausing to show you a book that was tucked behind a canvas at the side of the room that I forgot to pick up here because, you know, don't think you've done enough reading today.
The Book of Yael, Signs of Stone, Eucharistic Rituals of Forbidden Cults. Texts collated by Monsignor Vacher, legate in the Curia of the Vatican.
Numerous devilish cults speak of monstrous creatures called the Old Ones. These supernatural beings are believed to be possessed of powers equivalent to those of the gods of antique religions. Adepts of such cults refer to forbidden literature in order to cause these frightful entities to appear before them. What serious student of folk myths has not come across the names of Cthulhu and Shub-Niggurath? It must be said that these creatures wield tremendous power and are difficult to control once they have been unleashed into the world. Those who serve He who goes in shadows protect themselves with signs of stone, carved into the walls of houses or engraved on various objects. For those misguided servants of evil, the best protection appears to be that afforded by the sign of the most ancient gods, engraved in Manar stone, a heavy material said to be disagreeable to the touch. The sinful practices of those who fall into such errors can only lead to the darkest of despair, and are a mortal danger to the soul. Such monsters as those invoked by these foolhardy individuals are engendered when reason drops its guard. Man is easily tempted into perversion. It is why we must forever remain alert and renounce Satan with each breath we take. His ways are infinite in number.
Not exactly essential, but it does give you the briefest of hints on how to take out the final boss. Alright, this is by far the hardest section you'll find in all of Alone in the Dark, and it's also the moment you'll be using your gramophone as anything besides your own antiquated Walkman. Back in the study, we picked up a record called The Dance of Death. Well, guess what these creepy bastards are about to start throwing shapes to. That one's blued the noob, you don't need that. Okay, so get the fuck out of the way, first and foremost, because one touch from any of these spectral dancers will insta-kill you, then pop their tunes on. And you're really waiting for an opening to get to that key above the fireplace there. It will always be a tight squeeze whatever route they decide to go, so keep as close to the wall as you can right here. Jesus. You can save anytime you like, I should probably point that out. Strongly suggest you take that opportunity before you set foot in this death trap. There you go. Now you don't need to be smack bang in front of it, just touching the corner of the mantelpiece will do you. And there, that's the worst of it over. Now, run from this awful place. If you can get the fucking arrow keys to cooperate. If not, you can just slowly stroll from this awful place too. And head back to the stairs, for we have all the bits and bobs we need to finish the game now. These underground tunnels were essentially one screen of traps and aggravating bullshit after the next, but as I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear, there's only one more book down there to read, so it more than balances itself out. Into the Chthonian tunnels we wander now. What's a Chthonian, you ask? It's that fucking thing. We're gonna lure it down the way here to get rid of a boulder for us right there. It's a dumb son of a bitch and it won't chase you down these tunnels, but unless you're incredibly fast, you'll run into it again in a second after you put down this, I looked it up actually, I looked it up since the last part, and these are called zombie chickens. Zombie chickens. Confirmed by the developers at some gaming convention a few years back. But then, in the official guide for the game, which I think was only ever released in France, Edward describes them as deranged chickens, which I like much better. Not because it's more accurate, you understand, but because Edward thinks that's what a chicken minus its sanity looks like. We were pretty quick though, we didn't have to dodge the Chthonian in the end. Always a treat. Okay, so this is the first place in the game where you can fall in the water and ruin a bunch of shit in your inventory, which I don't recommend doing, but will not be too mad at you if you do, because it really doesn't have that much of an impact at this stage, so long as you've picked up all the same stuff I have. And notice that Edward has sneakily obtained a jump command from out of nowhere there. You actually get that the minute you come down into this underground section and not a moment before. Why they can't let you jump around the mansion is anybody's guess. What harm would it do, goddammit? I've paid my money. Let me jump down the fucking stairs. There's a spider wolf. Fuck knows, seriously. Fuck knows at this point. You can blow its face off, which is all I care about. More than you can say for the actual spiders up in the mansion, which are completely invincible. Christ, what's that flapping around in there? Fucking baboon sparrow. They could conceivably be the Mi-Go of Lovecraftian fame there, but who knows? Creature from the Black Lagoon knockoff from a couple of rooms back is supposed to be a deep one, so depiction quality considered, it's the most likely ID. This thing's a real pain in the fucking dick to shoot down, but it's gotta be done. You got a lot of sketchy 1992 jumping to do, and you don't want a Mi-Go knocking you off the pillars here. So, like I was saying, if you do take a drop in the drink here, you won't be able to use your rifle or your matches anymore, which is why it's very important you grab the lighter, because you need that lantern burning to defeat the boss of the finale. And fairly important you get the revolver too, because that'll still work even if it gets wet. There's not a whole bunch to shoot down here really, just that spider wolf, the Mi-Go. Deep ones are invincible, but they can be driven backwards with gunfire if they're right in your face. You can avoid the spider wolf in this room entirely if you do jump into the water in that initial pier room, because you can trudge all the way to the chamber we're going to wind up at in just a second here and climb out there. The tunnels are pretty well hidden. I only found them once because I was cursing at the controls trying to escape the deep one, but take a look at this utter fucking nightmare. Things don't seem too bad until you cross the bridge onto the next screen here, but when you do, take a look at this MC Escher-esque madness. Maybe it's because I am an utter simpleton, but I could look at this for hours and still not have it make any kind of solid perspective-based sense to me. That's a little better, there we are. The Mi-Go, or beetroot bat, or whatever we're calling it, isn't anywhere near as much of a hassle to you in this room as it was in the last one, which is a shame because it's far easier to kill. We're aiming for the chest on the ledge at the end that we just saw there. It's very easy to go straight in the water making these drops down the ledges. And I mean, this is the easy part. And you see the planks on the other side there. If you go that way, you got to deal with them collapsing underneath you as well. It's already enough of a fucking debacle trying to get this idiot to run in a straight line anyway. These controls, they've aged about as gracefully as Donatella Versace. Doesn't matter how many times I replay this game, they always throw me. I feel like my dad back when analog sticks started to become a mandatory feature in console games. He had a go at some poor kid in an electronics boutique over at one time. I think he thought they made the games. Don't even get him started on the Wii. Might as well be trying to control time with a fucking potato. Alright, here's a gem you'll need to get out of an awful bastard maze in a second. And here's our last book of the game with a shocking I tells you, final twist.
Memoirs of a Lost Soul.
The mask must fall. You who discover this manuscript understand this. I am here at your side. I am waiting in the darkness of my crypt. Soon you will belong to me. One of my slaves wrote this document. I have lived for 3 centuries, and my name is Ezekiel Pregs, or Elijah Pickford. You may choose which to call me. I do not hide out of fear. My power is immense. I have sailed the 7 seas. My ship, the Astarte, spread terror through all the continents. The corsairs judged me like the Welsh judges of 1620, but they could not destroy me, and neither could the pirates. Now, I am immobilized. Damned Yankees! Witchcraft, voodoo, and the Cthulhu cult. I know them all. I have reigned and implored the stones. Only the Chthonian haunts the cavern and resists me, but he dare not attack. I have need of a living body to regenerate myself. The Heartwoods managed to escape from me, but you who are reading these words, you will yield to my embrace. I hear your ragged breath and smell the stench of your fear. I have vanquished death. I built Deseto. I know what it is to wait. Cthulhu helps me.
My servants will lay you upon the sacrificial stone. My roar will rend the night. You will be mine, and I shall reign once more. Come to me.
He is just the merriest fellow, isn't he? I'd feel just awful hanging him. Damn junkies! So the plot doesn't really develop at all from this point. That's your final brick in the wall there. If you died at least once up to this point, you'll finally have an explanation for the game over screen, which is a zombie dragging your character by their ankles into a crypt and laying them out on the slab. Initially, I thought they were being quite accommodating, giving me my own little private chamber in Desetto, far removed from the mass grave in the back garden I thought I'd find myself in, but now you learn it was all under the pretense of making you some flesh tuxedo for an undead pirate ghost. Oh, this fucking maze. Jesus Christ. Alright, it's not that bad really as far as mazes go, but this is what I was telling you about the oil for your lantern. You will never get out of here without it. And that hurts like so much more because the final boss is literally right next door. I guess I'll throw you some more useless trivia while we steer our way around the gloom here. Why the name Desetto? Sounds like it should have some sort of significance, doesn't it? Well, Captain Pregs actually named it in a roundabout way after his ship, the Astarte. The Canaanite goddess Atargatis was referred to by the Greek historian Ctesias as Desetto, and was considered to be an amalgamation of 3 earlier Bronze Age goddesses, one of whom was called Astarte, or Astarte. You'll find a ton of Babylonian and Canaanite religious influence in Lovecraft mythos. Dagon was originally a Mesopotamian fertility god, instead of a 100-foot amphibious devil mackerel, but anyway. Final showdown! What you got here is Pregs' corpse, or soul, or ghost, or whatever. Not really clear on that part. Stashed inside a tree, and a deep one swimming around down there trying to stop you from getting at it. Now, you can't kill the deep ones, but you can lure it into the path of Pregs' fireball attack. Send it back to hell if you're so inclined. More trouble than it's worth though, so pop the talisman on the pedestal there. Catch a fireball in the moustache for your trouble. God bless that moustache. And then haul the lantern straight at the motherfucker and up he goes. With the very finest incendiary effects that 1992 had to offer. Now Pregs was one of the breed of very common villains in modern day fiction that made sure their evil lairs collapsed the second anything untoward happened to them, so now you're on for a big old backtrack to the front door, where sweet freedom now awaits you, instead of a pulsating eldritch attack arse. Now if you've read Lovecraft's story The Tree, you'll recognise a bit of inspiration in Pregs' design there. Not a mythos tale, that one, quite an early story back when the mythos as we knew it today was still trying to find a solid footing that wouldn't really appear properly until the Call of Cthulhu. Up until then we just had bits and pieces and vague references from stories like the doom that came to Samath, the hounds, the festival, the nameless city, etc, etc. Well, see why we had to read all those books now, don't you? Otherwise you'd just be wandering through this fucking place, fighting ghost pirates and burning tree people, wondering what the Christ was going on. The story was integrated a little better in the next mainline sequel, Alone in the Dark 2, but the game itself is fucking terrible. I cannot stand Alone in the Dark 2, I just about stomach the third one, being honest, but you know how Tomb Raider 2 made a radical departure from the first one by having you get shot in the face by gangsters every 10 steps? Well, that's Alone in the Dark 2. And 9 times out of 10 happens from off screen as well, so That's always a great way to boil a bladder full of piss for your tea, isn't it? Out the stink pipe we go. This will take us back to the cellar and out the little secret passage I told you about earlier. Don't worry, the eagle rats have disappeared now. Well, we're at the death of it now, so in closing, no, time has not been kind to Alone in the Dark, but Alone in the Dark has done time a hell of a solid. Oh, this aged little title, more than any other, grew the entire survival horror franchise as we know it today. This was a very obvious, very direct influence on Resident Evil, which refined the blueprint to a format that would remain largely unchanged for over half a decade. Which might not seem like a huge amount of time, but take Alone in the Dark's review scores, if you will, as a sign of just how fast gaming was moving on a technical front back in the early 90s. When this was first released, every industry magazine was screaming its praises. And 2 years later, when the 3DO port came out, it was criticised as clunky, unrealistic, and linear. 2 years. This ending's still as fucking ridiculous as it was back in 1992 though. Why is that skeleton so well tanned? Is it a skeleton or just a super emaciated smack addict? The sequel's set in Hell's Kitchen, so I mean, could be either really, couldn't it?